it is paying very close attention to all statements made by US President Donald Trump following his recent expression of disappointment with a phone call he had with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump had previously indicated optimism about Putin's willingness to settle the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, but after the latest conversation, he said he saw no real progress. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed that Russia is monitoring Trump's comments very closely, though he refrained from directly responding to Trump's criticisms of Putin. This development adds another layer to the complex dynamics between Russia and the US on the Ukraine war. We're now joined by Glenn Grant, who's an ex-advisor to Ukrainian Defense Minister, to discuss this in further detail. He's joining us live from Riga in Latvia. Glenn, thank you very, very much for joining us on the program. Given President Trump's public shift, which happens rather frequently, shall we say, from optimism to disappointment once again after this call with Putin, and the statements that the Kremlin is closely monitoring Donald Trump's statements, how might this affect both sides' diplomatic strategies going forward in regard to this peace deal?
It's quite an interesting question, because first of all, we actually have to believe Trump, which in itself is quite an interesting thing to do at the moment. We don't know whether Putin has actually said this to him for the first time, because Trump has a habit of lying. So it could be the first time, and this could actually be the first time that Trump has understood that Putin is not in the game of diplomacy at all. And if that is the case, then Trump actually has to do something, because he can't just come back to Washington and say all is terrible. He did not give any indication whatsoever that he would then put pressure on Putin to look at some compromise. Rather, one thinks that he will go back to what he was doing before, which is trying to pressurize Zelensky to compromise. And to understand what whether that is the case, we have to wait for tomorrow for his meeting with Zelensky.
Yes, Glenn, you are correct in saying there's been a constant flip-flapping of opinions to both the Ukrainian and the Russian leaders on behalf of Donald Trump. Is this slightly dangerous political theatre to you?
Yeah, I mean, they're playing games, and it appears to me that they're both just playing for time, because Putin is asking for time, no question about that. He wants time to break Ukraine, and yesterday's largest attack, with evidence that there are going to be more and more even larger attacks coming, and more sophisticated attacks coming, shows that Putin is going this way. And he wants Trump just to spin this out.
Yes, exactly. Glenn, you are staying with us for more developments from the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Kremlin has revealed that Russian President Vladimir Putin informed US President Donald Trump that Russia expects to agree on a date for a third round of peace talks with Ukraine. This upcoming round will follow earlier negotiations held in May and June. Kremlin spokesman Peskov indicated that while Russia continues its so-called special military operation, there is still an intention to pursue diplomatic efforts. The announcement suggests a tentative window for further dialogue despite ongoing hostilities in the region. Glenn joins us once again, with Russia signalling a third round of peace talks while continuing its military offensive, of course, Glenn. What leverage does Moscow hope to gain by keeping diplomacy and battlefield pressure alive at the exact same time? And not to say that increased pressure. We saw one of the biggest drone attacks of the entire war yesterday.
Well, firstly, this is, the talks are nothing to do with Ukraine, because Putin's people will just go there and demand capitulation, as they have done in the previous two periods. This is all about trying to signal that we are generous and open, and that we're doing our bit for diplomacy, hoping that they will spin along Hungary and Slovakia and people like this, thinking that Putin is really, on the good side, and that also it will perhaps add a degree of caution maybe into some of the Europeans, and slow down their decision making. He's slowed down American decision making to zero at the moment, but
Yes.
but some of the European countries are still not backing 100% Ukraine in the way they could do. For example, Spain.
Glenn, thank you very much. We have some more updates. Russia and Ukraine have carried out another prisoner exchange following last month's talks in Istanbul. Both countries confirmed the swap but did not disclose the number of soldiers involved. The agreement prioritizes the release of seriously wounded, ill and under 25-year-old prisoners. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky shared images of freed soldiers returning home, many of whom had been held since 2022. The returned group included army troops, National Guardsmen, border guards, transport service members and some civilians. Russia's defense ministry reported that the exchange took place in Belarus, where Russian soldiers received medical and psychological assistance before returning home. Under the Istanbul deal, both sides also agreed to repatriate the bodies of fallen soldiers. Media reports suggest Russia still holds thousands of Ukrainian prisoners, many captured early in the war, while Ukraine holds far fewer Russian captives. Ukrainian officials stated that these exchanges will continue in phases, with a focus on the most vulnerable prisoners. Glenn, these images seem very positive. We see prisoners going back to their homes. We're just running the ones from the Ukrainian side currently. However, how important are these prisoner exchanges? How significant are they? They are the only real significant things to come out of these two rounds of talks in Istanbul, the direct talks that have been occurring. The third one we are expecting very soon. What are your thoughts on this prisoner swap?
It's interesting because, prisoner exchanges were taking place for the whole of the time during the war. So this is nothing new. I think the fact that they're being linked to the talks is another sort of attempt by Trump to show a good side to it. But if he was actually genuinely showing a good side, then, for example, some of the more serious senior prisoners from Mariupol would have been released, and they haven't been. So there are still a lot of soldiers and officers who fought in that battle from Azov, who are, we know, are still being held and tortured. And this is a sad part of it. Russia still has a lot of soldiers that they should release that they're not. So they just don't. You might say they just don't want baggage that they have to manage. They can get rid of those. The dangerous ones they don't want to release.